My name is Nadia. I am 34 years old, and I am sitting in my small kitchen with a cup of tea that has gone cold. Outside the window, the rain is falling softly against the glass, and I am trying to figure out how to tell this story without my hands shaking. I have told it to my therapist. I have told it to my husband Marcus. But I have never written it down. Never let the words sit still long enough to look at them properly. And so here it is. The truth. All of it. And I grew up in a house that had two sets of rules. One set for my sister Priya and one set for me. I did not understand this when I was small. Children do not understand unfairness the way adults do. They just feel it somewhere deep in the stomach like a stone that never quite goes away. And Priya is 2 years older than me. She is our mother's eyes and our father's smile, and she has always known exactly how to use both of those things. Growing up, she wore new clothes every season. She had her own bedroom with a canopy bed and fairy lights strung along the ceiling. She had dance lessons and piano lessons and a birthday party every single year with a cake that our mother spent 3 days baking. And I shared a bedroom with boxes of storage until I was 12. I wore Priya's old clothes that never quite fit me because she and I were built differently. I was taller and broader, and Priya's clothes always pulled at the shoulders and sat wrong at the waist. When I asked for new clothes, my mother would look at me with this expression I came to know very well. A kind of tired impatience. Like I was asking for something unreasonable. Like I was the problem. And the food was where it was most obvious. And I know how that sounds. I know it sounds dramatic. But I am a grown woman now, and I have spent years in therapy working through what happened in that house, and I am telling you plainly and honestly. The food was where it showed most clearly. And Priya ate whatever she wanted. My mother cooked her favorite meals. Priya loved lamb curry and rice pudding and those little fried dough balls our grandmother used to make. The kitchen always smelled of those things. The table was always full when Priya sat down. And when I sat down, there was always less. Smaller portions. Sometimes nothing at all. I remember being 8 years old and watching Priya eat a full plate of biryani while my mother gave me plain rice and told me I needed to watch my figure. I was 8. I did not have a figure to watch. I was a child who was hungry. And by the time I was 10, I had learned to eat quietly at school. I spent my lunch money carefully. I kept snacks hidden in my school bag. I learned which of my friends had mothers who offered second helpings, and I made sure to visit them often. And my father was not a cruel man in most ways. He went to work. He came home. He sat at the head of the table and he ate his dinner, and he did not seem to notice, or if he noticed, he did not think it was his business to say anything. He was not the kind of man who involved himself in household matters. The kitchen and the children were my mother's domain. That was simply the way things were. And Priya and I were not close. How could we be? She grew up in warmth and abundance, and I grew up watching her have what I did not have. There was no malice in Priya. I want to be fair to her. She was simply a child who had been given everything, and so she assumed everything was hers by right. She did not know it was different for me. Or maybe she did know, and she filed it away in a place she did not have to look at. And when I was 15, I finally asked my mother directly. We were in the kitchen. She was making Priya's favorite almond cake for no particular occasion. Just because. I stood in the doorway and I said, "Mama, why do you treat us differently?" And she did not stop stirring. She did not turn around. She said, "I do not know what you are talking about." And I said, "You give Priya more food than me. You buy her new things. You take her places. Why?" And she turned around then. And the look on her face was something I have never been able to fully describe. It was not anger exactly. It was something more complicated. Something that looked almost like fear. And she said, "Some children need more than others. You are a strong girl, Nadia. You do not need so much." And I was 15, and I did not know how to argue with that. So I went in my room and I sat on my bed among the storage boxes, and I felt the stone in my stomach get a little heavier. And I left home at 18. I got a scholarship to university 3 hours away, and I packed one bag, and I did not look back. I called home on holidays. I visited at Eid. I was polite. I was the good daughter who had simply grown up and moved away. Nobody talked about the childhood. Nobody addressed the stone. And university changed me. I met people who had been loved straightforwardly. People whose parents had simply fed them and clothed them and told them they were wanted. I watched these people and I learned from them. I learned what it looked like to be someone who believed they deserved to take up space. And I met Marcus in my second year. He was studying engineering, and he had this way of listening to people that made you feel like nothing else existed while you were talking. I told him about my childhood on our fourth date. Not everything, just the outline. He listened without interrupting, and when I was done, he reached across the table and took my hand, and he did not say, "I am sure your mother meant well," or "I am sure it was not as bad as it seems." He just said, "That sounds really painful, and I am sorry that happened to you." And I married him at 25. My parents came to the wedding. My mother wore a beautiful green shalwar kameez, and she cried during the ceremony, and afterward, she told everyone what a wonderful daughter she had raised. I smiled and nodded, and I only cried a little in the bathroom before the reception. And Priya got married at 28 to a man named Tarek. My parents threw them an enormous wedding. 3 days of celebrations. A hall rented out. Caterers. A photographer who charged more than I made in 3 months. I attended all of it. I smiled in every photograph. I gave them a gift I could not entirely afford. And the DNA test was not my idea originally. And it was Marcus who suggested it. We were talking about starting a family, and he wanted to understand more about our health histories. His family was Canadian and mine was Pakistani, and he thought it would be interesting to know more about our backgrounds and any genetic factors we should be aware of. And I ordered the kit mostly for him. I spit in the tube. I sent it off. I forgot about it for 6 weeks. And then the results came back. And I was sitting at my desk at work when I opened the email. I expected percentages. South Asian. A little Central Asian perhaps. Maybe some results about health markers. And what I found instead was a match list. And the DNA service connected people who shared genetic material. It showed you your relatives. And when I looked at my match list, I saw my sister Priya listed as a half-sibling. And not a full sibling. And a half-sibling. And I stared at the screen for a very long time. The office was noisy around me. Someone was laughing by the coffee machine. A phone was ringing. And I was sitting very still reading the word half-sibling and feeling something shift in my chest like a tectonic plate moving after decades of pressure. And I did not tell Marcus that day. I needed to sit with it first. I needed to understand what I was feeling. And what I felt first was relief. I know that sounds strange. But the first thing I felt was relief because finally there was an explanation. Finally, the stone in my stomach had a name. I was not imagining it. I was not too sensitive. I was not ungrateful or dramatic or wrong. Something had been different. Something had been real. And then I felt grief. A deep, heavy grief for the child I had been. For all the meals that were smaller. For all the birthdays without cakes. For all the mornings I went to school with an empty stomach and learned to be quiet about it because asking meant that look on my mother's face. And then I felt something harder. Something that sat in my jaw and my fists. I am not going to call it anger because that word is not quite large enough. And I called Priya. And I did not plan a speech. I just called her on a Tuesday evening, and when she answered I said I did a DNA test and it says we are half-siblings. And there was a long silence. And then Priya said, "What?" And I said, "You and I share one biological parent, not two. Do you know anything about this?" And another silence. And then Priya started crying. Not soft crying. Real crying. The kind that means something has broken. And she said, "I have known for 4 years." And I sat down on the floor. Just sat down right there in the hallway because my legs stopped working. And I said, "How?" And she said she had found letters. In my mother's things. When our parents were moving house 4 years ago, Priya had been helping pack, and she found a box of old correspondence. Letters from a man. A man who was not our father. Letters that made clear that my mother had been in a relationship with this man around the time I was conceived. And Priya had put the letters back. She had not asked questions. She had told herself it was not her business. She had told herself it was too long ago. She had told herself our parents were old now and what good would it do? And I said it would have done good to me, Priya. It would have done good to me to know why my own mother looked at me like a problem she could not solve. And Priya cried harder. She said, "I am sorry, Nadia. I am so sorry. And I said I know. And I sat on the floor until the crying stopped. Mine and hers. And I called my mother the next day. And I want to tell you that I called her in anger, that I had a dramatic confrontation with raised voices and accusations. That would make a better story in some ways. It would feel more satisfying. But I am a woman who has spent years learning to speak from a place of steadiness, even when I am not steady. So I called her and I said, Mama, I did a DNA test and I need to talk to you. And she knew immediately. I could hear it in the sound she made. A small sound. Like air going out of something. And she said, can you come home? And I said, I will come on Saturday. And Marcus drove me. He sat in the car outside my parents' house, and he said, I will be right here. However long it takes. I nodded and I went inside. And my father was not there. My mother had asked him to visit his brother for the afternoon. She had done that much. She had made sure it was just the two of us. And she was sitting at the kitchen table when I came in. She looked smaller than I remembered. She is in her 60s now and her hair is fully gray, and she has the kind of stillness that comes from a long life and a lot of held things. And I sat across from her. And she did not make me ask. She just began to talk. And she had been 24 years old. She had been unhappy in her marriage for reasons she did not want to go into. She had met a man at work. An English man named David. They had been involved for almost a year. She had ended it because she wanted to save her marriage. She had ended it because she was ashamed. She had ended it, and 2 months later she had discovered she was pregnant. And she had not known with certainty who the father was. Not at first. But as I grew she became more certain. I had his eyes, she said. His long fingers. His height, a way of tilting my head when I was thinking that was his and not my father's. And she said my father had never known. Never suspected. He had accepted me as his without question. And I said, so why? Why the difference? Why treat me as if I had done something wrong? And she was quiet for a long time. The kitchen was very still. The same kitchen where she had stirred almond cake batter and told me I did not need so much. And she said, I looked at you and I saw my shame. I know that is not an excuse. I know you were a child and none of it was your fault. But every time I looked at you I saw what I had done and I could not find my way past it. I gave Priya everything I had to give because with Priya I felt clean. With you I felt like I was being punished and I punished you instead. And I sat with that for a long time. And I said I was a hungry child, Mama. I went to school hungry. I hid food in my bag. I was 8 years old and you told me to watch my figure. And she pressed her hands to her face. She said, I know. I know what I did. I have known what I did for 34 years. And I said knowing is not the same as stopping. And she said no. It is not. I did not stop. I am sorry, Nadia. I am sorry in a way that I know is too late and too small for what I did to you. And I did not forgive her that day. I want to be honest about that. I did not sit across the kitchen table and feel the stone lift out of my stomach and dissolve in a wash of understanding. Real life does not work that way. Real healing does not arrive in a single afternoon in a kitchen with gray afternoon light coming through the window. And I drove home with Marcus and I was very quiet, and when we got home I sat on the sofa for a long time without speaking. Marcus sat next to me. He did not try to fix anything. He just sat there in the quiet with me and that was enough. And over the following weeks I found out more. My mother had the contact information for David. She had kept it all these years. Some part of her had always known she would have to face this eventually. And I decided to reach out to him. And his name was David Hartley. He was 68 years old. He lived in Yorkshire. He had been married for 30 years, and he had 2 adult sons. He did not know about me. And I sent him a letter. A real paper letter, because that felt right for this. I told him who I was. I told him about the DNA test. I told him I was not looking to disrupt his life and that I understood if he needed time to process or if he chose not to respond. And he responded within a week. And he wrote back and told me he had sat with my letter for 3 days before he felt able to reply. He wrote that he had thought about my mother occasionally over the years. He wrote that he had not known about me. He wrote that he wanted very much to talk if I was willing. And we spoke on the phone for 2 hours. He has a warm voice. A Yorkshire accent. He asked me questions about my life, and he listened carefully to the answers. He asked about my work and my husband and what I like to do. He did not make it strange or heavy. He treated me like a person. Like a person he was glad to know existed. And we have met in person twice now. The first time was very awkward. He brought his wife Sandra, who had been told everything and who sat beside him with careful kindness and offered me tea and biscuits and kept the conversation moving when it stalled. The second time was easier. We walked along the seafront near their house, and he told me about his childhood, and I told him about mine, and neither of us cried, but we came close once or twice. And he is not my father in any of the ways that count for a childhood. He was not there when I was hungry. He did not know I existed. But he is my father in the biological sense, and he is a decent man, and he wants to know me, and I find that I want to know him too. And my relationship with my mother is complicated now. I think it will always be complicated. We speak on the phone every week or two. We are polite. We are careful with each other. She has started therapy, which I did not expect. She told me about it quietly one Sunday call. She said she is working through things she should have worked through decades ago. I said I think that is good, Mama. I meant it. And my father does not know the truth. That is a decision I have made carefully and not without conflict. He is 71 years old. He loves me in the way that distant, polite fathers love their daughters. He has never been cruel to me. He simply was not paying enough attention to see what was happening in his own house. I do not know what good it would do to tell him now. I have discussed it with my therapist many times. I may revisit that decision. But for now I have chosen to leave that stone where it is. And Priya and I are closer than we have ever been. It turns out that carrying a secret alone for 4 years had been its own kind of weight for her. We have had long conversations. Difficult ones. I was angry with her for a time. She was angry with herself. But she is my half-sister and I love her, and she loves me, and we are learning how to know each other as the adults we actually are rather than the roles we were assigned as children. And I am pregnant now. 14 weeks. The baby is due in the autumn, and we have not found out the sex yet because Marcus wants to be surprised, and I find I do not mind either way. And I think about what kind of mother I will be. I think about it more than almost anything. I think about what it means to be a child who is hungry in a house full of food. I think about what it costs a child to learn that they do not deserve what someone else in the same house is simply given. And I think about what I know now that I did not know at 8 or 15 or even 25. I know that my hunger was never my fault. I know that a child does not come into the world responsible for an adult's shame. I know that I spent years learning to be small and quiet and undemanding, and that unlearning those things has been the real work of my adult life. And my baby will not be hungry. My baby will not watch someone else get the larger portion. My baby will not learn to hide food in a bag or count pennies to make a school lunch stretch. My baby will be told they are wanted clearly and regularly and often. And I know this the way I know my own name. And last month I went back to visit my parents. My mother made dinner. She made biryani and lamb curry and rice pudding and that little fried dough that my grandmother used to make. She set the table carefully. She put flowers in a vase. And when we sat down, she served me first. She gave me a full plate. She asked if I wanted more before I had even taken a bite. And it was such a small thing. It was nothing. It was everything. And I looked at my plate and I thought about the child who sat at that table decades ago with plain rice and was told she needed to watch her figure. I thought about that child's hands folded in her lap, her learned quietness, her hidden hunger. And I picked up my fork and I ate every bite. And the stone is still there sometimes. I do not think it disappears entirely. But it is smaller now. And lighter. And on the days when I can feel it, I know what it is and where it came from, and I know that it is not mine to carry forever. And my name is Nadia. I am 34 years old. I am going to be a mother in the autumn. And I am no longer hungry.